Okay, looks like we're all set. Well, thanks for joining. My name's Josh Osborne. I'm the product manager for the CI tools here at Central Innovation, and welcome to today's CI tools Q&A session. We had a little break for a few weeks there around the launch for V25, but we're back up and running with these again now. And the purpose of this session is to just go over some sort of frequently asked questions about the CI tools that have come in over the period since we last did one of these. I've had a handful of questions come in recently to do with the wall coverings and coverings in general, and a couple of things to do with doors and windows. So that's what we're going to largely look at today. But if you have any questions that you want to ask, please enter those in the questions panel during this webinar, and if I have time I'll look at those today. Otherwise I'll include those in my list of things to look at for next week's session. The session will be being recorded as well, so if you want to watch this later, or if you have to pop out halfway through, you can come back and watch it on the MyCI website. That'll be uploaded there probably about this time next week. So if you head back over there, you'll be able to find this session there, and also all of the previous versions of this webinar are there as well. So if you've missed any others that you want to catch, there's a brief description on each one telling you what's covered in each thing, so you can go and see if there's anything that might have already been covered in the webinar before. But yeah, today I'm going to be using ArchiCAD 24, as you can see here. So most of what we're going to be looking at, I think actually everything that we're going to be looking at today also applies to ArchiCAD 23. So if you haven't upgraded to 24 yet, everything that we look at today you'll also be able to see in 23 as well. And in versions 22 and older, things will be much the same. We're going to look at the stuff to do with the Doors+Windows schedule, showing a datum level in the schedule. That's not available in 22 and older, I don't think. So you will be missing that feature if you're on those older versions. But if you're on 24 or 23, that should be there for you. If you do have any questions, as I said, enter those as we go through, and I'll check them at the end. But yeah, can be anything to do with the tools, or even not about the tools. If there's any non-tools related questions, I can give them to the guys that run the ArchiCAD Q&A sessions, and they can cover those as well. And if you're having any trouble with the audio or screen share or anything like that, please let me know about that too. But yeah, that should cover all of the housekeeping. So yeah, the first thing I want to look at is some stuff to do with the coverings tool. We had a couple of questions this week about some things to do with the set out of coverings, particularly in relation to openings. So we're going to look at that. And then I'm just going to briefly go over how the covering styles works, which may not be something that you have heard of or used. So we'll look at how that works. And then later on, I'll quickly go over the way that the Doors+Windows schedule datum level setting works in our schedules, so that you can see what that looks like and how you can change it to work the way that you want it to as well. So let's start off with some wall coverings. One of the main things that I wanted to look at with these is using the edge offsets to make your coverings do what you need them to. So on this building, which you may recognize as the building that we use for pretty much all of our demos and stuff, you can see I've got some wall coverings here, and there's actually a gap at the moment underneath this big window here, where the covering isn't passing underneath. Now, normally in this particular project, it's not actually a problem, because that gap is actually going to be taken up with some decking at some point, but I don't have that turned on at the moment. So this is a good way to illustrate the issue. You may have this in your projects where you have your wall covering coming down, and it's actually overlapping the bottom of the wall. So it's running down further than it should be, which I know is something that the building standards require, I think, in most regions in New Zealand. So you'll probably have this happening quite often. And what we want to do in this case is we want this weatherboard covering, shiplap covering, to go across this little sliver at the bottom here, which is not doing. So if I go into the settings for my wall covering, let's just look at the configuration. So you can see at the moment the base shape is set to flat instead of follow wall, and the height for that is 50. So that's how we've got the offset happening there. It's being offset by 50 mil, which is what you're seeing there. And what we want to do is we want to set an offset for underneath the opening to compensate for that extra offset in our covering. So what we're going to do that is we're going to go into our openings section here, and we're going to look under edge offsets. And in the cladding section here, you can see there's offset settings for each of the sides and top and bottom of the openings. They're all set to 0 by default, which is what you probably almost always want. But in this case, we want it to offset so that it takes this 50 mil into account. So I'm going to go to my B value here. You can see the offset value of B. I'm going to set that to -50. So it's going to come up 50 further than it would normally. So I'll just hit OK on that. And when we do that, you can see it has now added that 50 mil back on underneath our opening. So if what you wanted to do was get that to carry on under things that it was cutting out before, the way that you can get that to happen is just by using that edge offset there. So just to show you that again quickly, it's under the edge offsets setting under openings. And we used a value of -50 there because our covering is offset by 50 below the wall base, but obviously you can set that to whatever you would need it to be. So if your overhang is by 100, set it to -100. If it's 50 but you don't want your covering to come all the way up to the base of the opening there, you can use a different value there as well, just to get partway and that sort of thing. You can see how you would use that to do various things. And obviously, aside from using this as a sort of a way to get around having gaps at the bottom when you're using the base offset, you can obviously use it to do edge offsets normally as well around your openings if you need to do that. But that's the offset, I guess. We're re-offsetting something that is already offset. The next thing that I wanted to look at was styles, which I had a handful of people ask about during the week. And also, it's just something that we have come across recently that when we mention, people seem surprised about. Seems like not a lot of people know about the covering styles. So I'm just going to quickly go over how those work and the kinds of ways that you can use them. We actually have all of our coverings have styles built into them by default, but you may or may not be using those. But here's what they look like. I'm just going to select a wall. The styles work on walls and roofs. We'll look at roofs in a little bit, but let's start with the walls. If I go into my wall covering and go to the cladding setting here, you can see the profile here is set to shiplap smooth, but it's grayed out. I need to turn off this. Sorry. Excuse me for a second while I get rid of that. Okay, so you can see it's set, the profile is set to shiplap smooth, but it's grayed out at the moment, and all of the values there are grayed out as well. And the reason for that is because we are using a style which is overriding this. So the profile setting is the setting of what the actual cladding should be, but the style here, which isn't grayed out, that is the overall style, which is kind of like a favorite almost. It's not quite the same as a favorite because a favorite applies to all of the settings, whereas this style applies to just the settings of the covering type. So shiplap smooth selected, if I come in here and change to shiplap grooved, you'll see that it updates everything in here to be the new type, but it's still grayed out because it's being controlled by my style. So this is a good way to set up preset ways of, in this case, doing cladding that you will be using often, so that you and the others in your office don't have to go through and set your shiplap type to be the exact dimensions and type that you want every time. You can just save a style as shiplap, the ones that we use, and then that will always be available as a style for the you and your other people to select, rather than selecting the shiplap profile and setting the dimensions to what you need it to be. So there should be a handful of styles in there by default that you can see, but you can obviously make your own and also customize the ones that are there. So I'm just going to cancel that so that we can go back to what we had there before. You can see that these two wall coverings are matching at the moment. So one of the other things that you can do, obviously, with styles is that you can, and the same applies to favorites in a similar way, you can change the style and then you're going to want to update existing place elements with that change that you've made. So I'm just going to quickly show you how that works. Going back into the covering settings, shiplap smooth is selected. I'm going to hit the edit style button here, and that will ungray all of the fields so I can make changes to this style. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to make the boards bigger. And then I'm going to save my changes, and that regrays everything out, so it's back into its sort of its locked stage. And if I click OK, you'll see the changes are made, so I have much wider boards on this particular covering now. But we've made a layer out of this covering here. So these are both set to the same style, shiplap smooth, but they look different. So what you're going to want to do in this case, and in essentially any case when you've gone through and modified a style that you know is being used anywhere else, or even if you don't know if it's being used, what you can do is go to the CI Tools menu, come down to Coverings, and you'll see this option here that says Update Styles. If you do that with no elements selected, it's going to say you don't have anything selected. Do you want to apply it to everything? Just hit OK on that, and it's going to go through and it's going to check the whole model for all of the covering styles and then update anything that's using a style to the newest saved version of that style. So you can see that that went through and it updated this wall covering here to match the style that we just modified there. So you can go through and make changes to any of your styles and then use that update styles function to make everything else catch up, essentially. And you can use this for styles in Doors and Windows as well and that sort of thing. So if you're already using them in other tools, the way that it works is roughly similar. Inside of the styles, obviously we have our cladding style, which is what we're looking at here, but we have multiple other sub-styles as well. So if you look under openings, each of these opening types has a style associated as well. So there's a opening, I guess, master style, and then there are sub-styles for each of these as well. So the head trim has its own style, the edge offset have their own style. You could save this as a style if you wanted to, this change that we made before. You can go through and you can make a new style that, say let's add a rectangular profile around there. Offset it from the cladding so we can see it easily, and we're going to save that as a style. So just type in the name for the style that we want and hit save. And now that's going to show up in our list of available styles. So if I hit OK, it's going to apply that to this covering here. And then now that we've got it set, and assuming that we set the dimensions to what we want it to be and everything, we can come into here and just choose the jam style that we set up already. Everything's grayed out as you would expect, and it's set to the things we had it set to before. And now we just hit OK, and we've applied that jam style as well. So you can go through a lot of the different parts of your coverings and set up styles for each of them. And the idea here is similar to what you would do in your ArchiCAD template with favorites for certain things. You can essentially set up your template to have all of the styles that you're commonly going to use in it built in, so that then as you're drawing things up later, you don't have to mess around creating things on the fly and that sort of thing. You just go and apply the styles. And the same thing works roughly on the roof covering as well. So if you go into the roof covering settings, you'll be able to see in the cladding settings, we have a similar thing happening here. So you can see that the actual cladding type is set here, but it's all grayed out, and our style is set above it. So it's set to ribbed at the moment, and you can edit your style, make changes to it, and then save them. And the other thing that you can always do in any of our tools that use styles is if you don't want to use styles at all, you just want to go and set it to whatever you want it to. So essentially use it as if styles don't exist. Just hit the custom settings button and that just unlocks everything, and you don't even have to know that styles exist. So you can then go through and set whatever cladding type you want, set the dimensions that you want, and hit OK, and it's going to apply all of those changes, but you didn't have to make a style or update a style or anything like that. So if you aren't interested in using styles, the custom settings option is always going to be there on any of our tools that use styles, so that you can just ignore their existence entirely. But it is a very useful thing, especially if you are setting up an Office template or something like that, to go through and set up a handful of these in ways that you think would be useful to you and the others in your Office. Basically, it's a thing that you can do early on in the process or in your template that's going to reduce you having to go through and make these changes manually as you go. And it also means that if everyone's using the same styles in your Office, you don't need to worry about people using slightly different settings for things. Someone might create a wall cladding somewhere, and then someone else creates a different wall cladding somewhere else. They both look like weatherboard, but one of them slightly different dimensions, something like that. Using styles will get around that as well, obviously, because they'll both just use your house weatherboard style, and it'll be the same in all cases. And if you do know that people have been messing around with styles at all, or if you just want to be sure, you can always just go through and not cabinet, go to coverings and run this update styles thing just to make sure that all of the styles are up to date in the project. If there are no style changes and you do it with nothing selected, it only takes a few seconds for it to go through and check everything, so you don't really lose much by just being sure on that count if you are using those. So that is the coverings styles. And yeah, if you do use the doors and windows styles, these look quite similar. The wall and roof coverings both use styles. The slab and column edge coverings don't use styles at this stage, mostly just because they are relatively simple in comparison and didn't really seem like the kind of thing that people would want to be using styles in. But if using styles on your, say, your decking or your columns or something like that is something that you'd be interested in, please do let us know, and we can look at adding in that functionality, because that might be something that's useful in certain cases. But I think for the vast majority of people, the walls and the roof coverings is probably the two where it makes the most sense. So that's the coverings tool. The next thing I want to look at is just a thing or two in the doors and windows tool. So I'm just going to open up a door and window schedule, which we have in this model. And one of the things that you might have noticed came in around IKEA 23 sometime, is that in the door and window schedule settings, we added in this function to dimension the datum. When the settings come up, here we go. So if you go to the dimensions part in here, you'll see that there's this show datum level here next to the cell height. So at the moment you can see it is dimensioning the cell heights, and we're just going to turn this on and hit OK. It's going to ask me if I want to update my schedule, so I'll say yes. Wait for it to rebuild that. Sorry, my computer's on battery power, so it's running a little bit slower than usual. All right, and you can see it has now labeled those dimensions there with what they're dimensioned to at the moment. So it'll be the wall base over everything at the moment. So one of the things that you might run into if you have been using this is that you get some kind of wild stuff if you're using multi-story windows and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to kind of mess things up so that we can see what's going on here easily. Let's just extend this wall here up so that we can do it. I'm just going to untrim that. Untrim that. So I'll just make our wall a little bit higher, and then I will move this window further up. There we go. Obviously not a realistic scenario here at the moment, but just to illustrate what sort of thing you could have happening. So that was, I think that was 107. Just check that. Yeah, 107. So if I update my schedule now, going to take a second again. What's going to happen is it's going to, because I am dimensioning the base, oh, what was the phrasing that we use? Dimensioning the where the base of the window is anyway. It's going to be floating way up in the air. Here we go. Yep. So you can see it's still dimensioning to the wall base, which is now almost 3.5 meters below it. So it looks awful in their schedule. So you want to be able to get around this sort of thing. Obviously, you could just get it to not dimension down to there, but you probably do still want that. And so the way that we have added into the tool that you can get around this is if you go into the settings for the window, you have an option to choose what you want that level to be. So if I go into the settings for this particular window, just from the settings for the window, go down to schedule here. And at the moment it's set to wall base. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say I want it to dimension to first floor actually instead. I'll hit OK. Obviously it doesn't make any changes in the model, and then come back to my schedule and update it so that we can get something a bit more sensible looking. So that's just going to rebuild away there. You may have also noticed that there was a setting there to still treat it as to be collated with the rest as well. So if you do have windows with multiple different sill heights that you want to be collected together still, you can tick that option to make sure that that happens as well. It's just rebuilding. There we go. So you can see 107 now. Instead of saying wall base, it's dimensioned to first floor now. So we get something much more sensible looking in our schedule than we had before. And yeah, you can apply that to windows or doors, and it just helps to keep your schedules looking tidy when you are dimensioning that particular value in them. So if you had any questions, please enter those. We've got about 5 more minutes before we finish up here. There were a handful of other things about doors and windows, which I might just quickly show you here while I'm waiting to see if any questions come in. So one of the things that I wanted to just very quickly look at, and if you've used doors and windows for quite a while, this may already be second nature to you. But one of the things I had a question about this week was just the way that you can do different amounts of door leaves and that sort of thing. So let's look at a window. So if I go to my glazing panels, see we've got one really wide window here. It's fixed on one side and an awning on the other side. I am just going to reset the settings here to be the default size. Okay, so as you may know, of course, you can click in here and choose what you want each thing to be. And if you're working with doors, one of the things that goes on with these is that you can set the number of leaves here. So basically we've had a few people starting out, and it's not it's probably not super obvious from the interface the way that this works, I would say. So I just wanted to explain how this works. So when you set it to be a door, rather than setting up, say, 4 panels inside this window that are all set to door, the way that you would set up, say, a bifold on each side, for instance, would be to come in here, set it to door, and then instead of adding more doors here, just go down to the number of leaves here and set that to what you want it to be. So if I go in here and I set 2, this is 2 on the left, and then set a 2 here, that's 2 on the right, that will now set up a window which has, it's easier to see in floor plan, 2 doors on the left and 2 doors on the right. And then I can go through and I can set the door type to be bifolds. And you can see now it's doing exactly that. So instead of having to add, say, a door on each side and that sort of thing, and then make sure that those are set to both differently set to the same door type, and you can do it that way if that's what you want to do, but sort of the way that the tool is intended to be used is by just entering the amount of panels that you want on each side here, and away you go. And there's also a setting here to choose which way you want them to open to as well. They default to opening to the exterior, but if you want that to be switched, you can go in and do that there as well. So that's something that we had come up recently in some support tickets. And while we're here, we've also got styles in here, which you may have used. And you can see that the way that this works is quite similar. You've got this larger selection up at the top, and then as soon as you select a style here, it grays out the rest and sets them to what you choose here. So you can come through and choose the style that you want, and it applies those settings down here. You have the options to edit or go into custom mode and make your own, but you can just apply the styles as you want them to. And they work very much the same way as the coverings styles do as well. All right. That looks like that has been half an hour. I don't think we have any questions. No. If you do have any questions later on after this session, or you think of anything else that you'd like to see covered in one of these webinars, just email them through to nz.support@centralinnovation.com, or go to my CI and log a support ticket there and just say, hey, suggestion for the webinar for next week. Could you please show us how to do X? And I'll see those, and we'll go through and try to address anything that comes up that way, or just ask the question to the support team, and if they think that it was something that would be useful to be covered, they can tell me about that as well, and we'll cover that in the next week's session. But I hope that has taught you something new, or reminded you about something that you forgot about. Don't forget nz.support@centralinnovation.com for questions or technical support or anything, and thanks for your time.